So the other day in a video, I spoke about the dangers of blindly believing what you're being told, of believing things that you're being told without asking for receipts. I spoke about Shenanigans, who was communicating with someone behind the scenes that we didn't know who it was, because she told us we didn't need to know who that was because this person had given a sworn statement to the RCMP. I've mentioned in subsequent videos that it turns out this person is this Anita, who's popped up randomly from who knows where. But I'm starting to wonder if she's just been lurking in the background for a long time and sharing misinformation, and now she's decided to come out and put a face to it. I mentioned my doubts the other day about this woman when she made a post on Facebook claiming that she was the person driving the vehicle that transported Meadow to the reserve when Malaya left Cindy's place, and that it should have all been perfectly fine. The reason I questioned this was because, having read that post, I sent her a message saying, look, this is very different to what we've heard from Daniel and Derwood, so would you care to tell me some more, because I'm very curious and I'm willing to listen. And her response to me was, I'm not allowed to talk, so in the interests of the investigation, I'm not allowed to share that information with you. I'm like, okay, whatever, thanks, bye. And then she started getting a bit chatty and sending me messages. And I've spoken to a number of people who she's also been sending messages to. So it sounds like she is spending pretty much all day sitting on Facebook and messaging people and having rather lengthy conversations. But anyway, so she sent me messages talking about Cindy, talking about Malaya, and they were throwing shade on both Cindy and Malaya and standing up for Wade. I'm like, okay, well, interesting. And I was like, I'm kind of doing the shimmy to get out of there. Like, yeah, okay, I'm starting to not be interested in what this woman has to say, because on one hand, she claims to be really, really close to Cindy, and Cindy's like a little sister to her. And then on the other hand, she's bad-mouthing Cindy and being really negative about Malaya. And she sent me a message claiming that Cindy knew nothing because Cindy had never been to the trailer. And I know I said this in yesterday's video also, but I'm just reiterating this for anyone who's not heard me say this. She claimed Cindy had never been to the trailer, and that's why she knew nothing about what was going on with the children. We have statements from both Cindy and Wade saying that they had been to the trailer. Wade spoke about having to do a polygraph because they had been to the trailer picking up the children. He spoke about the conditions of the trailer. We had Janie saying, well, Cindy only came here a few times. Janie hates Cindy, Janie hates Malaya. Janie would not say something positive about Cindy if she could avoid it. So I straight out questioned this woman. I said, well, what you're telling me contradicts what Janie has said. So are you telling me Janie lied? And she ghosted me. She didn't respond to that. She then, sometime later, sent me an audio that was directly from Mike Darman. And it was a Janie McKenzie audio. One of the ones that he'd been playing on his channel and breaking up. I thought, well, that's a bit odd. Why are you sending me this? What's this got to do with anything? And I sent her a response saying, is this one of the audios from Mike Darman? No response. The next day she sent me a link for one of Mike's videos about Janie. And then after that, silence. So I was like, I really am not certain about this woman. Really, really uncertain. I've noticed that Mike has been he's put out 3 videos today. And these videos are all information that he's gotten from this Anita woman, and he's putting it out as factual. And I'm going to come back to that. But this is a woman who has convinced 2 content creators that I know of that she is some key figure in this, that knows all this information and is so trustworthy. And you know she's trustworthy because she gave a sworn statement to the RCMP. She's also convinced Belinda that she's trustworthy, because when I saw that post, I messaged Belinda and said, what do you know about this woman? She said, well, she's been communicating with me for some time, as she seems quite credible. She's given a sworn statement to the RCMP. And the funny thing for me with that was that sounds so much like Derwood with his comment of the only evidence that you need is that this person will give a sworn statement in court when this goes to court, or something like that. So straight up I'm like, why is this content creator pushing this person's narrative and saying they're believable because they've given a sworn statement to the RCMP, saying they don't have to provide receipts because this woman has given a sworn statement to the RCMP, when Derwood came out and said something like that, we just laughed it off and said this guy's a complete utter tool, and he's basically coming up with a massive lie to avoid giving receipts. My theory at the time was this woman was probably just someone who has followed the case, and you get this with every case. You reach a point where there is so much information on the case that you start having people coming out of the woodwork and contacting content creators with stories that they have patched together from all the information that's already out there. And they will throw in one little nugget that they've made up. We had this in the Kylie Rodney case with a guy that was labelled Red Flag Ronnie. That was completely crazy. I couldn't even begin to try and explain it, because even now I can't wrap my head around it. It seems like there may have been several Ronnies all coming forward pretending they were this Ronnie guy. But then we also had this we had it a number of times with the Kylie Rodney case. We had 2 people who came forward, claimed they were at the party and were giving information. And then, of course, like I've said before, it seems every case there's a deathbed confession, and I'm waiting for that with this case. Although I guess that Mallory guy probably comes close to that, because he claimed that he's just so unwell that, he has to put this out on the table. So maybe he's if we're filling in our bingo card for this case, then that's probably our deathbed confession. But every significant case that I've followed or covered, if it's a case where there is a lot of talk about the case, or where there's a lot of information coming out about the case, you always get people who come out who pretend to have connections, and all they're doing is giving back a lot of the information that is known to make themselves sound credible, and then making up crap. And I'm sorry, but I think that's what this Anita woman is doing. And it concerns me especially when I hear Derwood standing up for her. Now, why am I bringing her up in this video? I'm going to come back to that. I'm just going to put a pin in that for now, and I'm going to start going through some audio. So in this video, I'm talking about this alleged witness that came forward and reported seeing 2 vehicles stopped on the side of the road the morning that the children went missing. And the statements that were given basically about these witnesses. I'm going to do it in order. So I'm going to start with the private investigator. You know the one, she's gone to ground now because basically I called her out about 2 months ago when she came out on the Turkey Guys show, made a whole bunch of bold-faced lies. I emailed the RCMP and said, can you confirm or deny this, give me some information? And they came back with an email which pretty much just shot her down in flames. And she's gone to ground, but it seems that she is still allegedly working with Derwood and Darlene and that crowd of people, which is concerning. And I'll explain what makes it even more concerning when we get towards the end of this video. Now, you would have seen the thumbnail that I did for this video where I said, whose lie is it anyway? And I had Derwood, I had this Anita woman, and I'm not sure if the images that I've seen are the actual Chrissy Travers, so I just put a detective on there to symbolise her. But you'll understand the problem as we go through this. So let's start with what the PI said to the Turkey guy 2 months ago.
You know, I wonder about the police's work with this just to an extent. I mean, I respect them. I love them. I appreciate them. I work with them often. But my question is that, so there was a witness that has come forward that actually states being on Lansdowne Station Road Lansdowne Road, and they actually were stopped by a vehicle, two vehicles. One was identified as Alvin McKenzie, and the other person, one of the occupants of the second vehicle, was named as Jenna Jowdry. So when this witness went to the police with the information, they didn't really do anything about it. But I'm just wondering, given the fact that they pulled him over in order to check this evidence that they found at 10:45 in the morning on May 2nd, and yet that item was not reported as found until after 3:21 by a girl named Emily Ogley.
So you probably noticed this woman uses a lot of the same BS strategies that Derwood uses. At the beginning, trying to set the stage, trying to get people's attention by, oh, I've got this question, and, you know, I don't think the RCMP really dealt with it in terms of how important it is. Now, DT is going to ask her for clarification in a moment, but so far the story we have is this witness was travelling down Lansdowne Road and they got stopped by a vehicle, two vehicles. So she starts with a vehicle and then she changes it to two vehicles. And one of these vehicles was identified as Alvin McKenzie. And then in the other vehicle, it's not in the vehicle with Alvin McKenzie, but in the other vehicle was Jenna Jowdry. You might not have heard of her, but she is connected to the McKenzie clan. So, according to this private investigator, they pulled this witness over, so they flagged him down to ask him to check evidence that they had found. And she's very specific about the time here. It was 10:45 in the morning. Just a quick timeline reminder. The children were reported missing at 10:01. RCMP were on scene at 10:32. So RCMP had been on scene for 13 minutes at the time that this event allegedly occurred. Anyway, let's go on because then there's a little bit of clarification here.
So why didn't they report these items found at 10:45 in the morning and head in the other direction rather than go to the house and report it? Why did nobody ever hear about it till late in the afternoon?
I don't know. Like I said, this is the first time I've heard about any of this.
Well, there's a lot of stuff that's been distorted between all this project obstruction that has been going on between these camps. And it is quite frustrating trying to run an investigation when you have 20,000 other investigators competing for that spot. So,
right.
You know.
So run that by me again. Somebody got pulled. Mackenzie. Which Mackenzie got pulled over?
No, it wasn't a Mackenzie that got pulled over. It was our witness.
Okay.
Was driving down the road, heading to a fishing spot, I believe, and happened to notice these people on the side of the road. Slowed down. They flagged them down. The girl said, "We found a shirt." He's seen her run out of the bushes towards the vehicle. And then she said, "Oh, we found a shirt down here." And
Look, Granny, I found a centipede. I found a worm. It's that same sort of sing-song storytelling, which straight away makes... I mean, this woman has been proven to be not remotely credible, but it's alarm bells for me when I hear someone who sounds like they are channeling Janie Mackenzie.
told them that they were family from Truro and they were out looking for the missing kids. Well, the witness had never heard of any missing kids or anything like that at that point. So was curious, went and looked at the shirt that was placed ever so nicely over the top of a little pine tree.
Now at 10:45, it's not going to be family from Truro who are there searching for the missing children on the side of the road. And this seems to link very, very closely with one of Daniel's claims, where he even told RCMP that Cindy got there much faster than she should have done. It just sounds to me like this private investigator was spinning a tale to try and discredit Malaya and her family and try and score points for Daniel's family yet again. Look, they're not the ones who are doing the shady stuff. And then she gets her story all muddled up because she claims there was a shirt placed ever so nicely over the top of a little pine tree. The problem with that is that the pieces of clothing that were found on the ground, and the piece of blanket, it wasn't over a piece of pine tree, it was a different kind of tree. I can't remember what they said, but it wasn't on a pine tree, it was a different kind of tree. But right now she's doing her very, very best to try and establish that Hayley and that planted evidence.
And then those guys ended up departing ways, but when they left in the complete opposite direction of the house on Gairloch. And then later on, I'm checking the court documents, finding out that Emily Oakley reported finding these items, and her timestamp on her photo for those items was at 3:21 p.m. But those items were discovered at 10:45 a.m. We have a witness statement.
So apparently a witness statement trumps any sort of data from a phone that shows the time that something was photographed. Because of course you're going to believe a random statement by some witness as opposed to metadata from somebody's phone. And yes, Amira gets herself into these odd positions, which is when the snoring gets worse. So right now she's oozed over the edge of her bed, and that's why she's been snoring so much. And I should probably pause there and just say, for all those people who've been doing super thanks and super chats and buy me a coffee, Amira and Mouse will be getting new either heated beds or heat pads to go in their current beds for winter, thanks to your contributions.
Gotcha.
So I don't understand that.
I don't either. That's interesting. I mean, at 10:45 a.m., that's super early.
Right?
That's like the police didn't even arrive there. They just arrived at Gairloch Road for I don't know, 12 minutes already at that point. I think they got there at 10:27.
Precisely.
Yeah, she's a great PI, isn't she? She doesn't even correct him because it was 10:32 from memory. I know that it was definitely after 10:27. I haven't checked on those details for a while, but it was 10:32 or 10:34 or something like that. So he has given the wrong time. She's completely unaware that he's given the wrong time.
And so, you know, now if it was, I guess, a McKenzie, I mean, where did that name come from? I know you mentioned it.
Because unlike the police, I actually made sure that my team supplied this witness with a complete photo lineup of anybody and everybody we could compile that could possibly be related to the case. And after numerous selections, they did finally pick out Alvin McKenzie as one of the drivers of a silver Civic 4-door, and Jenna Jowdry was hanging out the back of a dark-colored sedan.
So it seems that on behalf of this lawyer, Darlene Thomas, she was stalking people around Lansdowne Station and taking photos of people around Lansdowne Station. Because she's basically saying we had photos of everyone around the area. And then she's trying to say, and that makes us better than the RCMP. But she's basically admitting here to stalking people in the area. And then she's actually also saying that this identification occurred after numerous selections. So it sounds like we have a scenario here where they've got this witness in and they put down a bunch of photos in front of him and said, pick the 2 people that you saw. And he's picked 2 people and they said, no, that's wrong. Go again. No, that's wrong. Go again. Let's try for a 3rd time. Well, you've got 1 right this time. Let's go for again. See if you can get the other person, if you can figure out who they are. I mean, that's what she's saying here. She's got a bunch of photos of people from the area without their permission, so they've stalked people. And then this witness, they've basically just gone, no, that's not right, try again, until they got this witness to select the people that they wanted them to select, if that even occurred. So you have a silver Civic 4-door, which apparently requires more than 1 driver, because one of the drivers was Alvin McKenzie. So I don't know if someone had to sit on his lap and he was doing the pedals and they were doing the steering, or if it's like some of those learner driver cars that have a brake pedal on the passenger side also, or if it's some sort of special car that requires a number of drivers to just control it. Because Alvin McKenzie was one of the drivers of that silver Civic. And then you have Jenna Jowdry, I'm not sure, who is part of the McKenzie clan, essentially, in the other vehicle. And she hasn't actually established which of those 2 vehicles that these people were in, if she is trying to refer to Emily and Hayden as being there. Although she doesn't say that, it sounds like, based on what she's saying here, that one of the people was Jenna Jowdry, so that probably was her who came running out of the bushes, and the other person was Alvin McKenzie. Sounds like there were multiple people with them, but they weren't identified. Clearly, they ran out of photos, or the person was like, look, I've already guessed 20 times, don't make me guess anymore to give you more of the people. And then here, according to this PI, these people were identified by a very valid source. Now, she hasn't specifically connected Hayden or Emily to this particular instance at 10:45 in the morning, but she has inserted people who were allegedly family of Malayas from Truro. So she is hinting at it being these 2 people, Hayden and Emily, and possibly someone else. But of course, the chances of them actually being there at 10:45 in the morning, and at not just being there, but having dropped Patty off at the house and then be out searching already? Pretty much zero.
Okay.
They were confidently identified by a very valid source.
And has this source spoken to law enforcement?
Yes.
Okay.
Everything that I'm stating to you has been forwarded to law enforcement at the time that all these claims were made, but nothing's been followed up and everything's just been kind of lost in the mail.
Gotcha. And where was and how far away was this from Gerlach Road that
Well,
this
you know
interaction
where
occurred?
sorry, not to cut you off. Sorry, hon.
It's okay.
You know where the t-shirt was found along with the blanket?
I don't. I'm not. I know where one blanket was found, just the
Like
one
a
that
piece
was in
of the
question.
blanket, sorry. On the tree?
Yeah, the one on the tree. I'm
And
familiar
so-
with. Yeah, I'm familiar with that one was found.
So that's right where it was.
Okay,
I can send you the logistics to all of that as well.
that'd be great. Yeah, I'd like to look at that. Because I know that the blanket was found just shortly before 4:00 by, I believe it was family members of Malaya's.
Correct. Emily Oakley and I believe Haley.
Mm-hmm.
Emily Oakley was the girlfriend to Hayden. She was staying with Patty and had actually come to the search with Patty from Truro.
So
Honestly, she's as bad as Derwood with this whole trying to really sell her story. It's been confidently identified by a very valid source. That is overselling to the max. That is not necessary unless you are actually not being truthful. So it makes me question how much of this story has been created directly by her, because it certainly seems from the way she's talking that this is being made up. She's bending over backwards to try and convince her audience that this happened and that the people who have told her this are just super, super credible. I just want to point out her use of hun there. When she said to him, whatever it was, something hun, that was patronising. That was her trying to establish that she thinks she is better than him, she's more important than him, and she's just, gracing him with her presence. People like that do kind of irk me when they treat other people like that. Especially when it seems really clear that they're actually lying to those people. There is things about this story that she's saying that are certainly not truthful. And not truthful from her. Why does she need to really sell this notion of it being verified by really, really credible people? And her source is a really, really credible source. My question here is, what is her agenda? What is the real story here? Because I can tell you 100% that this did not happen. But figuring out whether this is all coming directly from her or whether someone has told her some of this and she's just extended the story to make herself look impressive, I don't know, but it's not credible. You may remember when I covered this that I checked up with law enforcement about her claims that this hadn't been followed up on, and got an email back from Alison, who's the liaison, basically saying yes, they check up on every single tip. And she gave me a number like 1,040 tips, and from that there was something like 1,400 tasks developed. So she's making some pretty bold accusations against law enforcement here, which you've got to admit also sounds a heck of a lot like Derwood, because he does the same thing with these accusations, trying to make law enforcement look incompetent. Okay, so I'm going to move on to Derwood's version of this story in a moment, but I'm going to play the audio that came before it first. because I think it is significant and it definitely ties in.
There's a girl named Anita Maxwell that's given a lot of information in this.
Yeah.
And I want to tell you that she's telling the truth. I want to say right open, I thoroughly believe her and her husband are telling the truth. And they've been fed a bunch of bullshit and lies about me and my family, and we've been fed a bunch of crap about them. But I know it's not true, what we've been told about them, and I hope they know that it's not true what they've been told about us. And I want you to know that she's given a lot of true evidence in this. That Anita Maxwell is telling the truth. And that's one thing I want to clear up right there. Because there's been some lies and crap get in between my family and her husband. And it's caused some problems. And I want them to know that I believe them. I believe her. I believe her, and there's more people than me believe her. And she's helping this a lot. She's telling the truth, and her husband, Jamie's telling the truth.
Is there a gag order on things that she has said by the RCMP?
No.
That you know of?
I don't know if it's a gag order or not. I was told by a lawyer that she was asked to stop talking, but she hasn't. And I don't know everything she's saying. I've only gotten bits and pieces of it. And like I said, I can't take everything for the truth because there's so much crap around.
Okay.
But that woman's telling the truth.
I said this in my live stream the other day, but I really think this is so true. He has gone out of his way to discredit her, essentially. Although that's not what he's trying to do here. But he's gone over the top with these stories of, she's so credible, she's so believable. It's like him with his Janie McKenzie, she's the most trustworthy person you know, or whatever it was he said about Janie, where, Janie never lies, you can trust Janie. And he's doing the same with this Anita person. Straight up, from listening to what he's saying here, it sounds to me that he approves of her because she is pushing the right narrative. It also makes me question her connection to him. So far, she has come out and given information that has been proven to be untruthful. She is communicating with multiple content creators behind the scenes, giving them information that they are just running with, because she's basically stealing credibility, in my opinion, by communicating with Belinda and by saying that she is a close family friend of Cindy or something like that, and she's like an older sister to Cindy, and Cindy's really, really important to her. And yet I've heard so many things that have come from her that have been basically throwing shade at Cindy. And if Derwood is coming out here and telling people, hey, she's a good person, listen to her, listen to what she's saying, and if she is throwing shade at Cindy, I can't help but think that this woman is another person who is coming out on Daniel's behalf. Either that, or she is just some kook who is enjoying getting the attention. And I have to say, I am wondering how far back her little stories go. Has she been sharing these stories anonymously for the past 10 months and now started deciding that she wants more attention, and she's coming out and sharing her name and trying to get attention with these stories that are not truthful? Because honestly, the moment that you hear Derwood start to go on and on about how trustworthy a person is, how credible a person is, how they've said so much to take the case further, straight up, that makes me not trust that person. But also, I mentioned in my live stream today that I found it really, really odd that this Sue woman or Susan woman decided to ask Derwood about this story of the car on the side of the road, given that it is not a story that is connected to him in any way. It is not something he has ever discussed. It is not something that has him involved in it in any way. His name has never come up in relation to this story. And yet she brings it up. And she brings it up directly after he's made this big statement about this Anita Maxwell. And that concerns me. Is this foggy woman in tight with these people, with Derwood, with the PI, with this Anita, and with the lawyer? Because it seems like this foggy woman has been supporting Daniel. Now she is supporting Derwood and playing his, or interviewing him. And it just seems really odd to me that she goes down this road with this next lot of questioning, because it's not something that she would expect Derwood to have any knowledge about, you would think.
A few months ago, myself, along with I think a couple of other creators, I'm sure, received an anonymous email. And that anonymous email in it seemingly was kind of like a witness statement almost. I don't know where it came from because it was sent by an anonymous source, but it appeared like it was a statement that was provided by a witness that came along. I believe it was Lansdowne Road, I believe. I can't recall right now, but I should have actually had it out in front of me. But anyway, on the day that children went missing, going back to May 2nd, 2025, in the morning, after the children were reported missing, there was a search going on. And people were coming along, I believe it was Lansdowne Road, and saw a couple of vehicles parked at the side of the road. And they also saw somebody coming up from a ditch, getting into that vehicle, into one of those vehicles. Do you know anything about this at all?
So like I said, this is totally out of left field. Why is she asking him this when there's never been any indication of him having any connection whatsoever to this? Now, straight up, the first thing that stood out to me is that we had the PI claiming that this witness was some credible person, and yet this woman is saying that she got an anonymous email. That's not credible. And if you have an anonymous email, then according to this Chrissy woman, her witness, they got them in and interviewed them and got them to identify the people that they saw. Well, if it was an anonymous email, how is it that this Chrissy woman is claiming that the person was a credible witness, and this super credible person then came in and identified particular people? It makes no sense. So it seems that either this Chrissy woman is lying about how they came about the witness, or the anonymous email came from her or someone connected to her. And here's where the question comes in that I put on my thumbnail: whose lie is this in the first place? And this version from Susan is that this person was going down the road, they just saw someone coming up out of a ditch and getting into a vehicle. I would have loved to have heard directly from her what this email said. I would actually love to see this email. But I can't help wondering, also, and this again goes back to this Chrissy woman, is the reason that she went up on the Turkey Guy's show because she tried to put this story out via email first, sending anonymous emails to content creators, and the ones that she sent them to basically looked at it and went, it's anonymous, I can't verify this in any way, so I'm not going to bother following up on this story. Had she done it now, I could probably name 2 or 3 content creators who would just get super excited and run with the story regardless of whether or not it was credible. Pardon the cynicism, but there are people who are content creators right now who are turning this case into a joke, and I've said so much about that, but anyway, moving on. I would, though, like to know if there are any other content creators who received an email from an anonymous email with this information, or whether it was just this Susan woman that received this anonymous email, or if, God forbid, just because someone is a content creator doesn't mean that they are always truthful. And this woman only started covering true crime with this case. She was doing other things on TikTok. So how do we know that this isn't something that has originated from her? If no one else is saying they got this email, but then we have Chrissy saying it was a credible witness that was interviewed. That doesn't sound like an anonymous email to me. So again, what's the origin of this? Whose lie is it? Or is it multiple people who are lying? Now, there are inconsistencies, but rather than kind of interrupt the flow too much, I'm going to talk about each one of them after I've gone through all this audio. I will point out a few, but for the most part, I'm just going to lay it all out at the end.
Well, I don't like to make it appear like I know too much, but yeah, I'm going to restate to you what I was told about that, supposedly in confidence by a private investigator. The private investigator wants to get this information out right now and has given me permission. We talked about this earlier today, me and this private investigator. They called me when they knew I was going to be talking to you. And they have a problem with this one piece of evidence that they've been trying to clear up and trying to find information about it, and they can't. So they asked me that if you mention this, to let it out. So this information that I'm about to tell you doesn't come from me. It comes from a report from a private investigator. And by the way, this private investigator has uncovered a lot of, it's unbelievable. I don't know how they did it. They know more about me than I know about myself. But anyway.
Okay, for starters, there's a lot of stalling going on here with Derwood. Clearly, he was not prepared for this question. Clearly, he knows nothing about this topic. So he's trying to make it up on the spot. This is my belief. I don't believe that he sat down and had a conversation with the private investigator just before doing this interview with this foggy woman, because why would anyone think that she was going to ask Derwood about this? Because, like I said, this doesn't connect with him in any way. So why would she think he was going to discuss it in this interview? And he's going, oh, this piece of evidence that they're trying to clear up. Well, given that this is something that Chrissy was talking about 2 months ago online on the DT show, then this should have been long ago handed over to RCMP if there was any truth in the matter, and she shouldn't actually be looking into anything anyway. It was my understanding that she was no longer working for Darlene. So why is she still sniffing around if that is the truth? I mean, this woman has gone to ground. We've not heard anything from her since I basically exposed her after her time on the DT show. So I doubt very much that she has had any sort of conversation with Derwood. I suspect that she has slunk away into the darkness that she came from and given up on whatever it was she was doing. But Derwood just can't help himself. He has to make it sound like he is an expert here. So he has clearly listened to this conversation that she had on the DT show, and he's not prepared, so he's going to try and remember on the spot what the story was that Chrissy gave 2 months ago. But what he's going to do also is add in a little bit of snippet of information to connect with a big fat lie that came from this Anita. And I'm going to tackle that after I finish tackling what he's saying here. But he's doing his best also to separate himself from this story by saying, well, this is what I was told by the private investigator. Essentially, I was told in confidence. But then, he's like, I was told in confidence, but she asked me to come and blab it out publicly because she wants this information. But then he says that this information doesn't come from him, it comes from a report from a private investigator. He's trying to give it even more weight, more validity. Well, this has got to be truthful because this has actually come from another source. This has come from a credible source, which is one of the things he loves using. And that's what he's doing here. He's trying to establish this isn't something that I'm making up on the spot. This is something that was told to me by this private investigator. And this private investigator is just, so absolutely brilliant that they know more about me than I know about myself. He's really trying to sell his story before he even starts. But not only is it him trying to sell the story before he starts, trying to set the stage, trying to convince his audience that this story is valid, this story is important, it is also him stalling, trying to figure out the bones of his story. Now, I'm not going to comment on all the narrative devices that he uses when he's telling this, but I'm just going to say, pay attention for the way that he tries to bolster his story throughout. The way that he adds in little phrases or little words here and there to try and make the story sound either more dramatic or to try and make his story sound more credible. I will say kudos to Susan because I think straight away she could smell the BS because she's asking him questions along the way for clarification. And I think possibly, even though I'd really love to have heard her say the version that she knows, I think the reason why she did not was for her to basically catch him out in a lie. She didn't want to give him any cues, so she wasn't going to say what it was that she had heard, the version that she knew. She just asked him about it without any prompting, without any leading questions, and then she's asking him clarifying questions to see how much he knows or doesn't know, to see how much BS he is actually coming up with.
There's a report that there was 2 vehicles stopped on the side of the road.
What time was this, Darren?
10:40 in the morning on May 2nd, 10:40.
And do you recall what road?
Right on Lansdowne Road.
Okay.
Right on the main road.
Okay, it was Lansdowne Road. Okay.
And well, actually, I think it's Gairloch Road, but yeah, it's Gairloch Road. But anyway, that the vehicle, the front vehicle, there was a guy stopped because he recognized somebody that was in the vehicles. He was out fishing, and and he just stopped beside the two vehicles because he recognized somebody in the second vehicle. The guy in the second vehicle was Alvin McKenzie, and Alvin verified this with me. The people in the front vehicle were not sure who the driver was Hayden, Malaya's brother, and the girl in the ditch that took the shirt up out of the ditch was a girl named Emily Ogley, Hayden's girlfriend. Alvin McKenzie was in the second vehicle that was parked in behind the first vehicle. The people in the first vehicle was Hayden, that's Malaya's brother, and his girlfriend was out of the vehicle, coming up out of the ditch with a shirt. And apparently there was another shirt down in the ditch, and then there was some rags or something hanging in the tree. The guy stopped because he recognized Alvin. The car they were driving was a maroon-colored car. And the private detective is fairly sure. Now remember, this is coming from a private detective. This is not my testimony. The person in the maroon-colored car that was driving it, they believed to be Justin Martel. Now, there was supposed to be no phone calls or anything during that time. So, this is one of the suspicions that the private investigator had that I never had. It's totally independent of me believing there was more than one person. There was more than 3 people in the property that morning. So it's independent of what I believe. It's independent testimony from me. But the private detective believes that there's a good possibility that maroon car was owned by Cindy. Cindy owned a maroon vehicle at that time. And then immediately after that, the maroon vehicle got traded in for a newer vehicle. And the private detective traced it and found that just suspiciously, they're suspicious, and I don't know how they found this out, and that the vehicle was traded in so fast that there was still like personal stuff inside the vehicle. So the private detective is very suspicious that there was more people there that night than just the 3 people, than just Janie, Malaya, and Daniel. So that's what I was told, and the private detective is wanting anybody. What they're doing is asking me to put that out there. If it was mentioned, to put it out there, because anybody knowing any information about that, and they asked me to contact Alvin McKenzie and ask him again about that, because I talked to Alvin about that, and he verified he was there. He verified who was in the vehicle in front of him, but I never asked him if it was Justin Martel or not. And I never asked him whose vehicle it was.
Okay.
So I don't really want to bother Alvin. I don't want to bother the McKenzies because I believe they're under a lot of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I've known them for a long time, and I find the McKenzies decent people. Apart from what everybody's saying about them, most of them are decent, hard-working people.
Okay.
So I will point out here that one of the things that Derwood does a lot is create plausible deniability. And he's done it here too. So he said, I didn't think to ask Alvin these particular things, and now I don't want to bother him because the Mackenzies are good people. And same with the whole story. He's like, now this story comes from a private detective. This isn't my story. So he's working right through to create plausible deniability. But he's also using a lot of strategies for trying to create a little bit of drama and fill in a few gaps with things that he can't remember. So I'm going to do a comparison of what we've heard between the 2 people first, because there's a huge difference. Now, the first thing that really stands out to me is that he has used this narrative as a way of, once again, attacking Cindy. He has gone from this being a story about seeing some people planting evidence, which is what I think was the intention from Chrissy Travers, to a story putting shade on Cindy and claiming that she was actually there early in the morning. He's forgotten that this story was originally about planting evidence, and specifically about planting the evidence of the piece of blanket. So the first thing that we have here is that when she asks him where it is and he says Lansdowne Road, and then he corrects himself and he's pretty certain it was actually Gairloch Road. So straight up, that is a contradiction, because like I said, Chrissy was trying to establish this story of Malaya's family planting the piece of blanket and coming up with this witness that saw them planting this bit of blanket at 10:45 in the morning. And there's the next discrepancy. Both of them are so confident in their times. Chrissy says 10:45, that's very specific. Derwood says 10:40. So he's kind of got the story almost there, but it is again contradicting what she has said. I know you can say, well, it's only 5 minutes, but when you are being very specific with times, it makes it sound like you actually know exactly what the time is, and that there's no room for movement there. When I was talking about this on my live stream, and I said, look, 10:40 even is, or I might have even said it earlier in this video. Sorry, I can't remember because I started this video last night and I'm finishing it tonight. But with reference to the 10:40, I said, well, I think it was around 10:32 that the RCMP turned up. I said, I cannot remember exactly. So I've given a time, but I've put that qualifier in saying I think it was around this time. But both Chrissy and Derwood are so confident. She says it's 10:40, Derwood says it's 10:45. And then, while we've got this witness supposedly being anonymous, according to Susan, we have two versions of this again. So, according to Chrissy Travers, this witness had no idea who the people were in the cars, because they had to do a photo lineup to be able to identify Alvin McKenzie and Jenna Dowdry. According to Dingbat, this person, this witness, pulled over because they recognised someone in one of the vehicles. But he doesn't say who it was they recognised. He doesn't give any connection for who it was they recognised. Because obviously when you're making up a story like this, you don't think to throw in the relevant details. Now, Derwood is trying very hard here to remember the story that he clearly heard on the DT show, because he reckons that this guy that was in the vehicles was out fishing. Not he was headed out fishing or going fishing, but he was out fishing. So someone was apparently fishing in the middle of Lansdowne Road. I'm guessing they probably didn't catch many fish there, but according to Derwood, that's what they were doing. But I'll move on from that, because so far we've got this witness who, on one hand, stopped because he recognised one of the people. So we don't know why he chose to stop just because he recognised someone. Was he planning on having a conversation, or was it someone super famous and he wanted their autograph? No explanation. Like I said, when you're making up stories like this, you don't think of adding detail. So this witness on one hand stopped because they recognised the person. Yet according to Chrissy, the people had to be identified via a photo lineup. Also, according to Chrissy, the person stopped because they were flagged down by a female who ran out of the bushes and basically wanted them to have a look at the evidence that they had found, and that they hadn't even heard about a missing child. So you have, on one hand, a woman running out of the bushes and flagging down this random person who doesn't know who any of them are. And then on the other hand, this person stopped because they recognise someone, and someone is coming up from a ditch. So again, two different stories. And then, like I said, Derwood had to twist the story to suit his own needs. So according to the PI, the people that were identified were Alvin McKenzie and Jenna Dowdry, or however you pronounce it. According to her, Alvin was in one vehicle and Jenna was in another vehicle. And yet now you have Derwood running with this claim, because the thing Chrissy said was that apparently one of the people said, "We're family from Truro and we're searching for the missing children." But she didn't name anyone, and I think she was doing the Daniel and Janie thing of just giving a little bit of information and hoping that people would draw their own conclusions so that she couldn't be accused of making accusations, false accusations against people. So she hinted at it being people connected to Malaya. She even hinted at it being probably Hayden and Emily, just by the way she was telling her narrative, with the, well, I'm confused because, it said on the phone that it was found at 3:21, but, this witness saw people running out of the bushes at 10:45. So she's trying to get her audience to draw that conclusion, that it is Hayden and Emily and that they are planting evidence. But she's not naming it up, whereas Derwood, he just goes for it. He forgets about this Jenna Dowdry, who, if we are to believe that the other people there were Hayden and Emily, and that this Jenna, who is actually connected with the Mackenzie clan, would have been in a vehicle with Hayden and Emily, and that, so that makes no sense whatsoever. But Derwood's version completely gets rid of Jenna Dowdry and has Emily, Hayden, and he thinks Justin Martell. And then he must have realised how stupid that sounded, because he's basically gone back on that and said, well, I didn't confirm this with Alvin, so it might not have been Justin Martell. So he's blurted this out, realised it sounded really, really dumb, and tried to backtrack. Now, what's been said about the vehicles, to me, shows that Derwood almost certainly just made up this story on the spot, and that he's taken information from two sources, tried to put it together to throw shade at Cindy. It seems like there's a little party out there of people who want to throw shade at Cindy. So, according to the PI, we had a silver Civic four-door car, which is what Alvin McKenzie was in. We have another vehicle that was a dark-coloured sedan, which had Jenna Dowdry in the back seat. Well, now Derwood has introduced this maroon-coloured vehicle, which he claims was Cindy's. He's saying that the detective is pretty certain it's Cindy's, and he's trying to create some sort of impression that Cindy's done something wrong by claiming this vehicle was traded in immediately after that. And it was traded in so fast that they didn't even take their personal stuff out of the vehicle. Now, maybe you could argue, well, the dark-coloured vehicle or the dark coloured sedan, that must have been Cindy's maroon car. I would say not. Because generally when you are going to describe vehicles, when you talk about a vehicle being dark coloured, then you are referring to something that is so dark that you're not really sure what the colour is. It could be a dark grey, it could be a black, or it could be a dark blue. But it's a dark colour. It's a colour that is non-distinct, really, other than the fact that it is dark. If it was nighttime when you saw that vehicle, then maybe a few other colours you would include in that. But you would notice if that vehicle was a maroon colour, or if it was red, or if it was yellow or blue, like a electric blue, because they are not common colours in vehicles these days. You drive down the road these days, most of the time you're going to see a white car or a grey car. Most of them are going to be these big Touareg tractor SUV things. But you notice the different colours. But can we also acknowledge how illogical that is? Because we've heard from Cindy that she actually only found out the children were missing after she was contacted by Paddy, because Malaya tried to ring her and she was out with her horses, so she missed the phone call and then Paddy contacted her. So, for starters, these claims by Daniel that Cindy was there way too fast are just BS. That is trying to throw shade on Cindy. But not only that, Cindy went there separately from Patty. Hayden and Emily drove Paddy there. Cindy drove there with Wade. So the chances of it being Cindy's car, and he's trying to imply here that Cindy is the driver, the chances of it being Cindy's car with Hayden and Emily in the car are pretty much zilch. This is pure fabrication. And he is trying to throw shade on Cindy. But the problem is, he's forgotten the purpose of the original story. The purpose of the original story from Chrissy was to try and make it sound like Malaya's family had planted the piece of blanket. Derwood completely forgot the purpose of the story and instead decided to use it as evidence to say that these people must have stayed overnight, and this proves that there's more people involved, and he's trying to prove that Malaya's family are involved. The other problem with this telling that he's giving is that he is trying to establish in a different part of this interview that Cindy was behind the alleged abduction, non-abduction of the children. Well, she was a pretty damn busy person that morning then, wasn't she? Because she was doing something suspicious around Gerlock Road or Lansdowne Road, take a pick, with Emily, who was down in a ditch, running out of this ditch. And then she was also picking up the children and spiriting them away somewhere. It's not logical. So it's all a massive lie. Now, let's talk about this maroon vehicle. Because if you follow Mike Darman, then you probably will have seen this short video, or the full video that I'm going to play this clip from.
Why did Cindy Murray trade in the vehicle of Malaya's? When you ask, well, let me look it up right now to make sure I don't waste any time and I give you the accurate information. Because Let's read it. It's right here. Amherst Hyundai Cindy traded in the car. That's Malaya's car. Or that's the type of car Malaya had. A maroon Hyundai accent, I believe, right? Is that what it is? Red, maroon, what have you. A reddish maroon vehicle. So they live what, in Truro, and they drove 111 kilometers to do it in Amherst. Only days after Malaya returned to Cindy, days after she left that trailer with Meadow. So the question is, why was Cindy, and why was there mud all over the vehicle? It was extremely dirty inside, but they're dirty people. But there was a lot of mud outside. And Anita wonders, why was it so muddy? And why was Cindy so secretive?
So surprise, surprise, the story of this maroon car comes from this Anita woman who claims to be a really good friend of Cindy's, a family friend, someone who's almost like a best friend to Cindy and who's like a big sister to her and cares very deeply for her, but is going out of her way to contact all these content creators with all these stories that are trying to throw shade on Malaya, trying to throw shade on Cindy. Now let's start with the most obvious fact. That vehicle he's claiming there, and this is apparently information that this Anita gave him, he's claiming that it's Malaya's vehicle. No, Malaya's vehicle is a 2017 Nissan Pathfinder. Malaya did not own a vehicle before then. Even before she was with Daniel, when she was living with Paddy, if she needed a vehicle, she borrowed Paddy's vehicle. This is information that I have been given directly from Belinda, because I asked her this several months ago when I was looking into the coercive control kind of thing, because quite often in these relationships where there is coercive control, when a person moves in, like when you move in with the partner, they're like, oh, we don't really need two vehicles, let's sell your vehicle and keep mine. But Malaya didn't actually own a vehicle until she got that Pathfinder. So, first of all, the story about this being Malaya's vehicle, complete utter lie. As for the trade-in, well, maybe it happened, maybe it didn't, but it's irrelevant. Totally irrelevant. And this is not verified information. This is information that has come from a woman who, as I've said, has already been proven as a liar. She told me, and I've said this now a few times, she told me that Cindy's never been to the property, so she had no idea of what was going on. You've got Wade and Cindy who both admitted that they have been to the property. Wade has said that is the reason we had to do polygraph exams, because when we would go and pick up the children, we would pick them up from the property. And he goes into the detail of he never saw Daniel there when they went to pick the children up. He was saying this not knowing that he was being recorded. He was being truthful. So, and like I said also, Janie said, oh, Cindy's only been here a handful of times. Janie's not going to lie about something like that because Janie does not like Malaya, and Janie would have taken any opportunity she could to make Cindy look bad. She then pointed out when she was saying that Cindy never made it to any of the children's birthdays, even though Paddy did. So if Cindy had never been to the property, you can bet that Janie would have told us that several times over. So already we're talking about information coming from a woman who has been proven to be a liar. And the information already includes stuff that is wrong, because it's not Malaya's vehicle. It was never Malaya's vehicle. So it really makes me question who the heck this Anita woman is. What is her agenda? Because she seems to be coming out trying to discredit everyone on Malaya's side. Malaya and Cindy. So we have no proof that this vehicle ever existed. We have no proof that this vehicle was traded in straight after this whole thing occurred. But we can be pretty certain that vehicle was not there on Gairloch Road or Lansdowne Road with Jetta Dowdry and Emily and Hayden planting evidence or not planting evidence, depending on the location, on the morning that the children went missing. It's a fabricated story. Now, in terms of this whole, oh, how dramatic is this? They travelled a whole 111 kilometres to trade it in at Amherst. Well, you know what? There's nothing unusual about that. These days, people buy vehicles using online apps and web pages and stuff. The last 2 vehicles that I purchased, the last 3 vehicles that I purchased, I went online. I went through a search engine with Cars Online, I think it is. It's one of those web pages or apps where you put in what you are looking for, and it brings up the vehicles that are around. So these days you don't go around a whole heap of car yards just looking and hoping you're going to see the right vehicle. Almost nobody does that anymore. You go online and you search specifically for the type of vehicle that you are looking for. Now, let's say hypothetically that this did happen. Cindy's vehicle, I've looked at the images from Tint's video, and I can tell you that vehicle is only about 12 months old, or was only about 12 months old at the time that the children went missing. Meaning it is quite likely that in terms of buying that particular model, that it's not something that's going to be in every car yard. Now, I don't know what the situation is in terms of car yards around there, but I know from my experience, the vehicle that I've got now, I bought from down in Preston. That is a 150 kilometre drive from here. I was going to do a trade-in, but my other vehicle, because it was actually a 5-speed, not an automatic, they were going to give me a ridiculous price for it, so I went, screw that, I'm just going to give it to my niece as a gift, because, you know, why let them make a huge profit out of it when my niece is learning to drive and needs a car? So I didn't do the trade-in, but I still bought a vehicle that was 150 kilometres away. I had to go down to Melbourne on a train, catch several trains to get my vehicle. And that's what you do if you have found the vehicle that you are looking for. So in terms of a trade-in, you are going to trade your vehicle in at the location where you are buying your vehicle. So if they had found a vehicle online and that vehicle was 111 kilometres away, well, there's nothing unusual about that. This story of the mud and the leaving things inside, they did it so fast that they left things inside. And now I don't know if this comment was from Darman himself or from this Anita, but I'm thinking this is another story that Anita has given him, because I can't see why he would have any reason to say that himself, saying, oh, well, but they are dirty people. That is not the truth. We have heard from several people, including Hayley, that that's not what Cindy is like. Malaya, the way that house was at Gerlock Road, that's not the way Malaya was raised. We've heard that from Wade too. So, no, Cindy and Wade are not dirty people. And we've seen plenty of photos. There's a video of Jack and Lily sitting on a couch playing with a dog. Now, I don't seem to have kept a copy of that, but I'm sure most of you have seen it. That is at Cindy and Wade's house. That is Cindy and Wade's dogs. And it certainly doesn't look like a dirty place. So, I don't know if this has come from Mike Darman or this has come from this Anita woman, but again, it is not factual. So, this story about the maroon car is a fabrication. And I would like to know, how would you tow a horse float with a Hyundai Ascent? Because we know it's not Malaya's vehicle. It was never Malaya's vehicle. He's claiming here that it belonged to Cindy. Well, Cindy has horses, and we know that she had a horse float that she was selling. Hyundai Ascents are 4-speed cars. Automatic 4-speed petrol cars. They are going to pull a small trailer, as in like a flat trailer that weighs a couple of 100 kilos at the most. There is no way you would rip the arse end out of your vehicle if you tried to tow a horse float with a Hyundai Ascent. They're not big vehicles, they're not gutsy vehicles. The biggest engine you get in those is 1.8 litre. And that is a 5-speed, little itty-bitty car. It's not the smallest of the hatchbacks, but it's still a hatchback. Which goes back to the description from the detective that this dark-coloured car was a sedan. That Ascent is a hatchback, not a sedan. And let's be real here. When Chrissy Travers was sharing the story with the DT guy, she's making these claims of this person identified them using photos and all this sort of stuff. So the information that she gave DT is not going to have changed in the 2 months since that time. Because based on her account, her super credible witness had given her all the details. So they're not going to come back and change the details. So my question from this is, where does this story of these two vehicles stopped on the road, where does this originate? Was there ever an anonymous email? Or, well, I'm guessing there probably was. I'm guessing this Susan isn't going to lie about an anonymous email. But is that what Chrissy Travers received? And she's tried to turn it into a more credible sounding story? Or did it originate with her? Did she send out the anonymous emails? But we have this Anita woman who's popped up, and she's making all these claims against Cindy. And we have Derwood claiming about the maroon car and basically tying the story from Anita in with the story of the vehicle on Lansdowne Road to try and throw shade on Cindy. Was that something that Derwood just made up on the spot because this Anita had come up with this story about the maroon car, or is this a story that Anita has given him? We have 3 people who are proven liars giving stories with massive holes in them about events connected to this supposed planting of evidence on Lansdowne Road. And I have to wonder, I've got so many questions about this Anita woman for starters. Is she the origins of a lot of these anonymous stories that are complete utter BS? Like I said, did she maybe just start to gain confidence and decide to come out as herself rather than giving anonymous information? Or is she only coming forward now because Daniel, after he got his charges slapped on him, is unable to say anything about Malaya or Cindy or anything like that, anything that could get him into more trouble? So is she somehow connected with Daniel and she's come out to do this for him on his behalf? Because she's working really hard to discredit Cindy. She's working really hard to discredit Malaya. She claims to be so close to Cindy, but she sounds just like all the other people who are spinning tales for Daniel. Is she the person who came up with this story several months ago? Did she send out anonymous emails selling this story to people? Or, like I said, did it all start with Chrissy Travers? Did she make it up herself and then send out anonymous emails to people trying to share the story, trying to get it out, and then because nobody actually jumped on it and shared it, she went on the DT show so she could get an audience and make sure the story did get shared? Or maybe this is like that memory game. You know, the one where you're sitting there and one person has to go, I went to the shop and I bought an orange. And the next person's like, I went to the shop, I bought an orange and an apple. And each subsequent person has to add another piece of fruit or another item to the list of things that they bought, trying to remember the first thing. And the list gets longer and longer as it goes through different people. So is that what's happened here? Is this something that has either been invented by Chrissy Travers or invented by someone that we don't know who it is, and it's been shared with Chrissy Travers first, or shared with her and at the same time sent out as an email? And then we have this Anita woman that's heard the story and run with it, and Derwood has heard the story and he's run with it as well, and all their stories have collided to try and create a bigger version of the original narrative, and none of it is actually true. So it goes back to the question that I asked on my thumbnail. Whose lie is this anyway? Because it is a lie. None of this is verifiable. And yet we have Derwood here giving one story, we have Chrissy Travers giving another story, and we have this Anita giving multiple stories to whoever's going to listen. And it's not just, she's not just giving these stories to content creators. She has been communicating with anyone who has expressed interest. So I have heard from subscribers who've had lengthy conversations back and forth with her through Messenger because she seems to enjoy the attention. I've said this a few times now, but when you have content creators communicating with people behind the scenes, taking information that is not verified, presenting it as factual on their channels, this is going to turn this case into a circus. This is going to take things to a point where credible content creators are going to be forced to step away from this case for the sake of their own credibility and for the sake of avoiding any legal consequences. So I said this in my live stream this morning, and I'm going to say it again now, because today feels like it's been a really long day. I'm just really, really ticked off right now with what's going on. The amount of misinformation, the content creators who are communicating with random people that they can't verify the information that's coming from these people. They can't verify even the connection that these people have if they are actually genuinely connected in the way they claim. But these content creators are so keen on getting the scoop that they're going to put that misinformation out there with no receipts. Or they're going to put the information out there and claim, I don't have to give you receipts because this is only YouTube. And the person who told me this gave a sworn statement to the RCMP. Well, this person who claims to have given a sworn statement to the RCMP is starting to look like a massive liar. I saw a thumbnail this afternoon, or like a 2-second clip from this foggy woman where she's supposedly putting out a video that is saying that the RCMP spoke to an American or something like that. One of the stories that's been put out by this Anita woman is that she lives in America, but she was born in Canada, but she spends her time living between America and Canada. Totally implausible given that her husband is a roofer. He either works in a family roofing business or owns a roofing business. So I'm not sure how you can be moving back and forth between two countries when you have a business to run. But I suspect that this video that is being promoted by this foggy woman is an interview with this Anita. So it is going to be full of crap, basically, if that is the case. So I'm just going to go back to pointing out that this is all about Lily Sullivan, who was 6, Jack Sullivan, who was 4, and they were reported missing on the 2nd of May 2025 by their mother, Malaya Brooks Murray, who claimed that she heard them earlier that morning giggling and laughing in their room, but then they appear to have possibly gotten out of the house and vanished. And we have contradicting stories from Malaya, Janie and Daniel, the 3 adults that were on the property at the time that these children went missing. We have changed stories. We have things that are outright lies. And we have characters popping up with stories to try and discredit one or other side. What is important here is Lily and Jack. What is important here is finding out what happened to these children. Finding out who did what. Finding out what those 3 people know